Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Finney recording a lesson video for Red Wing High School 7th grade math. This lesson video is for concept number 5, subtracting negative numbers. And our lesson today comes out of our student workbooks, the Envision A7 Lesson 1-4 workbook. Before you start this video, make sure you pause and have your workbook out, and make sure that you are on page 25 of the workbook. So, yesterday in our day 1 of this concept, we reviewed some rules about adding and subtracting negatives. Specifically, we talked about what we often call the keep change or the KCC. The keep change says that we can turn subtraction into addition. So for example, if I had 3 minus 2, we could turn that into 3 plus a negative 2. And where this becomes helpful is when we look at doing something where we're subtracting a negative. So let's just say we had 5 minus negative 4. The keep change tells me that I keep the first as positive 5. I change the negative to a plus, and I change the negative 4 to a positive 4, which sometimes makes it easier because we can get rid of those negative signs. All right, so let's jump into today's lesson. When we're looking at subtracting positive and negative integers, a reminder is that we want to think about what we know when we're coming to adding and subtracting. So here, I know I have several students who are football fans. We won't debate whose team is the favorite or which team colors should be on top right now, but we can think about how to connect this in terms of a football field and a 50-yard line, moving negative and forward when you lose and gain yards. So there's an application for our triangle learners. And for our diamond learners, we can visualize this on a number line. Okay, we gain, which means we move to the right, and we lose, which means we move to the left. And for our star learners, we can think about it as subtracting in an expression. So if I started at the 3-yard line and I lose 8, 3 minus 8 is the same as 3 plus a negative 8. And so 3 plus a negative 8, if you think about that, I have more negatives than positives, so I know that my answer is going to be negative, and then I can find the difference. We could also think about this, going back to our triangle learners, being able to apply it to the real world. If I have $3 and I want to spend $8, I'm short $5. All right, let's look at an example together. So on the next play, the team gained 5 yards and then lost 6 yards. What is the total change in yards? So they gained 5 yards and they lost 6. Losing means subtracting 6. Subtracting is the same as saying plus a negative. Now we can see that I have more negatives than positives, which means my answer must be -1. And we can see that on our number line as well. I move 5 in the positive, but then I lose 6. And so I go back my original 5 and I'm down 1. So the total change in yards is -1. They had a loss of 1 yard. A loss represents negative. So again, we're using that keep change. We're recognizing that we can think of minus as the same as adding a negative. We're using this idea of opposites and additive inverses when we connect to this number line. So we're looking at the direction. First, I'm headed in the positive direction, and then I go the opposite direction further back. And so we could also think about this if we think of our additive inverses. I started with positive 5, and then I had negative 6. And so when we do our additive inverses, our 0 pairs cross out, and sure enough, I'm left with a negative left over, which it represents negative 1. Let's look at another example. All right, here I'm going to encourage you to pause the video and read through example 2. For those of us who learn by reading, this is an opportunity for you to do that. Pause the video at this time and read example 2. Now that we've had a chance to read example 2, let's look at how this works. Okay, so if I have a negative 2, I lost 2 yards, and then I lost another 5 yards because of a penalty. Negative 2 minus 5 can also be thought of negative 2 plus a negative 5. So when we think about that in terms of the keep change. Oops, got to turn on my marker here. I have negative 2 minus 5. The keep change says that I'm going to keep the first. I'm going to change the minus into plus, and I'm going to change the 5 into negative 5. Now we can see that I have debt. I borrow $2, and I borrow another $2. I owe $7. So let's look at a couple of practice problems together here. I'm going to encourage you to pause the video, and when you return, I'll have some answers written in for you to check your work. Welcome back, everyone. So here you can see some work written out. I'm going to talk through that work briefly so that you can double check your work along in your notes along with me. So you'll notice in some of these examples, I've chosen to use the keep change and change that minus into a plus, a negative, or plus the opposite. In others, I've chosen not to. So in letter A, negative 4 minus 6, I'm headed to negative 4, and then I go negative 6 or to the left 6 more, and I land at negative 10. In letter B, anytime I see minus a negative, I really like to think of the keep change. I also can think of that multiplication rule that says 2 negatives multiply become a positive. And so I keep the negative 6, I change the minus into plus, I change the negative into positive. So I owed you $6, I pay off 4 of it, I still owe you $2. Okay, so please pause the video and double check the rest of your work here. If you get stuck or you have ones that you struggle on, make sure that you ask for help. You could Google search another resource video on subtracting negative integers. You could email or private chat a friend and ask for help, or you could email me and I can respond and give you some help if you're still stuck and struggling on this idea of the keep change, which means that subtracting is the same as adding the opposite. If you still feel like you need a little more practice to be more confident, of course you can turn your workbook page and you can look at this key concept where we see that subtracting B is the same as adding the opposite of B, and you can do some of this practice. Perhaps you could do some of this practice and then share your results or your answers with a friend, right? In particular, I would recommend problem number 6 on page 28 as an opportunity for you to practice and double check your work with a friend before you move into your student choice tic-tac-toe board and your concept assessment later in this lesson. I hope this helps you with subtracting negatives. I will see you in our next lesson.